Hi there. In this video, I'm looking at the fourth chapter of Michy's Endgame technique book. It's the chapter he focuses on the 3-point game. Um, and we have done in previous videos, we've looked at the closeout, the 1-point game, the 2-point game, and not surprisingly, again, you're not going to be surprised to see that the 3-point game is where our opponent has an anchor on our 3-point, and we're trying to kind of get home safely, and also looking at possibly trying to win a gammon as well. Um, and it's a much easier chapter than the deuce point game. There's really just one principle to bear in mind that he's very strong about, and that is we need to clear the 6-point as a matter of urgency. He doesn't give any mathematical justification for this, but it's just in practice. If we don't clear that 6-point, uh, we're going to have problems as the game goes on. And so he gives this example to start with. I have to admit, before I read this chapter, I would have played this position very differently. I'd have taken one off the 4 and one off the 1-point. I'd look at my rearmost checkers and think, God, they're nice and even. That looks pretty good. I look pretty strong here. I'd be kind of delighted with myself. But I haven't cleared the 6-point, and Michy would say this is going to lead me to problems. And it does, because look what happens if on my following roll, I roll a 6-3. Well, the 6 is forced. I have to do that. But now I can't get, not only can I not save my checker on my 6-point, but what am I going to do with the 3? I give you a choice. I can either take that one off or I can take this one off. And either way, I'm leaving a double shot. So it's really, really messy. That was just an example of why not clearing the 6-point can leave you to problems later on. So going back to the original position, although that's what I would have done before I kind of read this chapter, the correct, now that I know to clear the 6-point, well, it's kind of obvious what I do. I'm going to bring one from the 6 to the 2-point and one from the 6 to the 5. That does leave me two bad rolls next. 6-5 will leave 2 out of 36 bad rolls in my next roll, but it's not as disastrous as a 6-3. So for that reason, it's correct to bear from the 6-point. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. Now, Michy takes our original position, and then he adds another checker and says, so now you have a bit more flexibility. A 6-3 won't cause the same amount of problems. And he looked at it and he said, look, the correct move, according to Michy, again, is the same move, even with the little bit of extra insurance against the 6-3 roll. I looked this up on XG as I was kind of recording this, and I found that Michy was possibly being he was rigging the position slightly to make this work, because when I looked it up and I went on XG saying, so Michy says it's the best roll, well, I found that it's not the best roll. My 4 off and 1 off would have been the best roll. Obviously, only a hair's breadth of a difference, but the 6-5 wasn't 6-2 was the best roll. And then I looked at the position. And I saw what was different was I set the position up on my XG to match the same opponent's checker layout as I had done in the first position. But Michy hadn't. If you look at our opponent's checkers in our opponent's home board, and that spare checker he has in a 6-point, when Michy set up his position, he moved it back a little bit. And that does make the positions where they're even. And so he definitely kind of manipulated our opponent's checkers to make the 6-5, 6-2 a clearer move. And I played with it a bit further and I said, well, look, if he's gone from the position we started with and moved a checker back, what if we move it back a bit more and give back a little bit better timing? And I found with that when I did that, the 6-5, clearing the 6-point was the right move. So I've come to the decision that the better our opponent's timing is for them, the more important it is to clear the 6-point early. So Michy doesn't say this in the book, but by kind of putting it and crunching it around in XG, I've kind of discovered that the more our opponent has good timing, the more important it is that we avoid problems and we just clear the 6-point early. I think if our opponent has less good timing, the race is also closer, which means our chances of a gammon are less. So we need to be more aggressive bearing off. So that's maybe why the 4 off and 1 off was better when our opponent was further advanced. But the better our opponent, I just thought this was a handy rule. I've kind of come up with kind of playing with this. The better our opponent's timing, the less, and I suppose as well as that, the less they're going to be able to stop us in racing to a gammon, the more important it is to be careful with the 6-point. Now, that's the only rule for the chapter. That is the chapter. If you learn, if you stop the video now, you've got the nub of the chapter. All Michy does for the rest of the chapter is give some interesting examples where clearing off the 6 point isn't always the right move. So, like everything in backgammon, you have the rule and then you have the exceptions. So, the chapter, the 90 kind of percent of the time, you clear the 6 point, but there are exceptions. And if we look at this one, if we were to clear the 6 point here by moving the two, 1 forward 2 and 1 forward 1, we'd end up with that sort of position. And Michy kind of sums it up that that's a horrible position to have. He quite nicely says, he points out that having 3 in our rearmost checker is going to leave shots, like a 6-5 straight away is going to leave a shot. And also he points out that having a stack of 5 in the 4 point, a stack of 5 is never a good thing to have. He has a nice way of phrasing it. He says that if you look at the 2 points, he said the 3 checkers in the rear point is going to leave shots, and the stack of 5 checkers, I love this expression, is always uncomfortable in backgammon. And that's really what it is. So going back to that position, in this situation, we don't, to avoid that ugly looking situation, we just take 1 off the 2 and 1 off the 1 point and hope that again, a 6-3 is still going to leave us problems, but it's still long term, it's a better position. Now, this is an interesting position because again, prior to this chapter, I wouldn't have played this and this isn't definitely an exception to the rule. What would you do here? I suppose, do you want to pause this video and tell me how you'd play your 5-3? No, sorry, your 3-2. And taking it you've unpaused, I tell you what I would have done without hesitation of this. I thought the only thing to do is 3 off the 5, just 5-0, take 1 off. But that actually leaves 14 bad rolls in the next go. So nearly half our rolls in the next go are going to leave him a shot. So we don't want to do that. So instead of that, we just go back to the original position. We just going to take on the 4 point. We're going to clear our 4 point. I was surprised by that. We've made a nice little gap there. Is that gap not going to cause us problems later on? But Michy's quite a nice little rule in that he said, look, it's worth leaving a gap because that's a 0 position. There are no bad rolls we can have next go that are going to leave him a shot. We're absolutely safe. So if you compare that position with no bad rolls to the previous position, which had 14 bad rolls, well, look, it's a no-brainer. We leave the gap and we just take the hit. I just thought that was interesting. And the final position then that I also thought was interesting when we rolled a 6-2 here. And I would have got this wrong prior to the chapter. Like if you want to pause it and think of what would you do with 6-2. And again, assuming you've unpaused. Well, the 6 is obvious, has to come forward. And I have to admit, I'm looking at that thinking, well, look, nice even structure at the back. A 0 position. I'm going to move my checker forward, playing 4-2. And I'm not leaving any, I'm so safe, I'm so nice. And I think this is quite a good example of just as we get better at backgammon, we need to be looking at the whole of the picture. If you look at it here, our opponent, if I have this right, has 11 crossovers to 12 crossovers to save the gammon. We're in a race for a gammon here. And yes, we're nice and safe here. As it stands, we don't leave. A 6-2 and a 5-2 will leave shots here, but otherwise we're safe. So we have 4 bad rolls. But Michy said, no, let's go back to that. He says, yes, you take the 6 off. If you take the 2 off, he was saying, yes, your 6-2 and 5-2 will still leave bad rolls. There's 4 more bad rolls. High doubles. You've given 4 high doubles. Double 6s, double 5s, double 4s, and double 3s will also give bad rolls now. But he notes that in the context of going for gammons, it actually has a very minimal effect because if we roll double 6s, we'll have 9 checkers off. So we're in a good position. We have more than a 50% winning chance, even if we're hit and trying to close out. We've still got a better than 50% winning chance. He actually said, to be accurate, playing that position there decreases our winning chances by only 0.5%, but it leads to 6.5% higher gammon chances. And it was just something, again, that I think when I've been going through this book, and particularly over the last couple of chapters, so focused on safety that I forget that sometimes we're going for a gammon. So I don't know why that check size popped up. We've covered that already. But I am going to finish off this chapter, leaving it to Michy. He He's looked at the closeout, the 1 point game, the 2 point game, the 3 point game. He doesn't do the 4, 5, or 6 point game. This is it in terms of the other chapters of the book are looking at other things that are happening. And I thought the easiest or the best thing I could do for you is just show you the excerpt from Michy's book. So this is what his summary of the 4 different types of games, the rough winning chances for your bear off, and that does depend on your opponent's timing, what your winning chances are going to be, and the strategy you should kind of look at. Um, the biggest, as said, if you look at it, strategies, I think in terms of the double six, I would say in the closeout, it's more about having an even structure at the back. Um, you're going to clear from the rear definitely as you kind of come through. Um, I, I just wanted to give Michy the final word on that. And again, in terms of the final word, he gives a little strategy for each one. And again, you can just read through that, pause and read if you like. Um, but definitely for this chapter, the 3 point game, the very last line there is that against the 3 point game, clearing the 6 point comes first. That's the only significant theme of the chapter. I'll be coming back. His next chapter that we're looking at is he's looking at positions where there's no contact and we're just in racing off, and that'll be the next chapter. I need to kind of go and study that, but I'll have a video for you about that shortly.